Welcome, everybody. Today is a webinar. We call it our series of Building a Better Business, brought to you by the team at Sundog here. First of all, my name is Cohen Barnes. I am the CEO of Sundog, and I will be your host today, and I'll help moderate the session with our guest speaker. I wanted to introduce Ted Rosenow. Ted is the CEO of Crum-Halsted, an insurance company that we personally have used I would say almost our entire time in business, and they have served us well. And Ted and I have presented multiple times, and he is a wealth of information and a true industry expert when it comes to insurance, but as well as when it comes to cybersecurity insurance, which we're going to be talking about today. Today's topic, the 5 things all business leaders need to know about the new cybersecurity insurance questionnaires that everyone's getting. And if you haven't gotten one, we're going to talk about that. It's coming your way. You're going to get it. And you're going to want to be informed because it's going to impact whether you get coverage, and it's going to impact potentially the price of your coverage itself. Real quick, for all those that are watching the video that we will have posted later, and we will send an email out and a link to the recorded video to all of you after the session. So you can forward that on to friends, colleagues, whoever it may be that you think could find value after attending this session today. So that'll come out probably later today. We'll get that all posted and on YouTube. So without further ado, because we got a lot to cover, I think we should just jump right in. You ready, Ted?
Ready to go.
Awesome. Well, Ted, why don't you kick things off? Tell us a little bit about what's going on with these cybersecurity insurance questionnaires that we're all getting at this point, and why they're important and what the change is about.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about where we were and how we got to where we're at, and then jump right into some of the important things we're seeing on questionnaires, and have you help us with some of the technical definitions behind things. So first, for many of you, you may not really think about, why do we have the cyber concerns we have today? But cyber insurance actually started about 25 years ago. And if you think about it, there's this event that some of us, if we're probably age 35 or older, are aware of. It's called Y2K. Cohen, I don't know exactly what was happening in your world at that time, but Y2K, for those of us that are old enough, we weren't supposed to survive. Our lights weren't coming on, our computers weren't going to turn on, and our cars weren't going to start either. So that's about when cyber insurance actually was starting and originating. So fast forward into the early 2000s, there wasn't that many insurance companies involved. They were trying to get their hands wrapped around the type of products and what they were going to offer. And ultimately, it started out with big questionnaires. We used to have large applications, multiple pages, 10, 12 pages. And because people didn't know what to expect and didn't know how to interpret or underwrite the risk. Ultimately, we get fast forward into the early 2000s, and we saw states. I think California was the first state that came out with some cyber rules and laws. And that's when really cyber insurance started to kick off into a faster pace. Ultimately leading into the 2010 era or so, and we started having claims with Target, Blue Cross Blue Shield, some of you may remember, very large cyber events. And at that time, many insurance companies jumped into the insurance market for cyber insurance, and things changed because even though there were big claims, there weren't a lot of claims that were being covered by insurance. So insurance companies were aggressive. They were opening up the type they had. They were offering higher liability limits, and it was a pretty good environment. It actually got down to where we could quote and issue a policy with 6 to 8 questions. We just need your name, your revenues, your website, and if you like the premium, we could issue and we could give you a cyber policy. So bringing us up to date, we all have noticed heavily in the media lately that last couple of years, cyber events just continue to increase. COVID and people at home and working remotely have only exponentially increased the amount of claims that are occurring because of the online access. So the market we were in, where few questions, low premiums, easy to get coverage, right? Now, because over the last 3 years, claims have steadily risen. They've been going up 2-fold, 4-fold, and insurance companies, whether we like to admit it or not, they're not in the business to lose money. So when they start to lose money, then things change. So that's the environment we're in today. Just recently, we're starting to see questionnaires going back to, I had one recently for myself that was 17 pages long. So the days of 6 to 8 questions are gone. You're going to have to fill out a complete application. You're going to have to fill out some supplementals and get a better feel for the actual protection that you're going through. With that, what's happening is coverage terms are changing. Premiums are going up, limits are being reduced, and there's a lot more underwriting scrutiny. And that's kind of the environment we're in today. And just to share openly with everybody, Crum-Halsted, we just renewed our cyber insurance last week, and our premium increase for this year is 90%. We went from $10,000 in premium to $19,000 in premium. And the initial—
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, the initial quote we got, Cohen, was for 40% increase, $14,000, and they cut our limit in half. So after negotiating and dealing with multiple insurance companies, we were able to maintain our limits, but obviously the premium jumped drastically. So, some people like to think because we're in the insurance business, it's all free, but we deal with the exact same things that all small business owners do. So that's kind of the landscape we're in. Just want to give that opening comment. And really, Cohen, one of the biggest factors that is coming up on all these questionnaires, there used to be a checkbox, kind of we just mark it off, no big deal, is really the multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. And it's gotten down to where, quite frankly, if you don't do that, and you're not enabling those features, it may drastically impact your insurability as new coverage or existing coverage goes. So why don't you talk a little bit about multi-factor authentication from your end, and I'll sprinkle in a few notes that are non-scientific. So
yeah, and when we put out this webinar, one of the things we listed was, if you haven't received one of these forms yet, it's definitely coming your way. Our client base this year, especially, it's been not overwhelming, but an overwhelming amount of those forms have hit our desk because they're pretty complicated, and they're asking a lot of questions, and some of them get very technical. And what's interesting is, depending on your insurance agent or your insurance carrier, they're going to ask you a variety of different technical questions, and some it's going to vary in sophistication, and some it's going to vary based off of your industry or the overall coverage amount that you want. But there is a common theme, and that's what Ted's talking about right now, is multi-factor authentication. That is on every single one of the forms that we have seen come through. And for those of you that don't know, most of us are used to it or have it in some form or another in our life. But multi-factor authentication, also referred to as two-factor authentication, what that means is when you go to log into something, a bank account, your email, whatever it might be, when you go to log into it, your username and password is one form of authentication. But besides your password, they want something else. And the thing most of us are used to is getting a text message with a 6-digit code, and we put that code in. So we put in our username and password, we hit enter, boom, we get a 6-digit code, we put in that 6-digit code, and now we're able to access whatever it is, bank account, social media, or an email account. And the reason that's so important is, if your username and password gets compromised, and that's happening all the time, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, everyone is getting compromised, and their clients and customers' username and passwords are getting stolen and getting sold out there on the internet. Well, what's beautiful about two-factor authentication is, even if that happened to you, if the hacker doesn't have your cell phone to be able to get that 6-digit code, they're not going to be able to access your social media, your bank account, or your email account. And that's why that one simple feature enabling that is such a huge security increase in gaining access to whatever it is that you're trying to protect. So that's two-factor.
Yeah, Cohen, real quick to back that up, I recently attended a webinar in specialization in cybersecurity, and you may be aware of this, but I was a little shocked by this, but 70% of all users use the same usernames and passwords across all of their different programs. And so the reality of it is what we're seeing in the industry, and you've known this for a while, Cohen, is usernames and passwords, we've outlived their life. Yep. Right? Because we've abused them and not used them effectively and efficiently. And so as a result of that, they're looking for the secondary way to prove who you are. And, fortunately with iPhones and things like that, with face recognition the things you're talking about is we're all getting used to it.
Yeah, and real quick too, a quick story. So if you're wondering, well, what does it matter about my email, right? So what if my email gets hacked? They can figure out, when I'm going to dinner or things like that. But here's a perfect example of how critical it is to be able to protect your email systems and why insurance companies want to protect that with multi-factor authentication for their clients. We had someone reach out to us. It was an organization, and they had been compromised, and they wanted us to find out how it happened, right? So it took us a couple of weeks going through all the audit trails of all their systems. But what happened was the office manager had her username and password compromised. So like Ted was saying, if you use the same username and password across multiple things, right? Well, if one of those get compromised, what happens is they take your username and password, they put it in a piece of software, and it goes and it checks chase.com, citibank.com, quicken.com, microsoft.com. And it reports all the systems that it was able to get into. Well, in this case, the hacker got into their email, the software did, raised its hand. Hacker looked at the email and said, all right, interesting, went through the inbox and realized that this person was responsible for invoicing for that organization. And they were in the middle of a large project that they were doing progress billing. Really quick, what the hacker did was create a message rule to when email would come from their client, it would redirect it to a subfolder. Hacker would go in, look, if it was benign, something just normal conversation, move it back up to the inbox and mark it as unread. Office manager had no idea. One point though, the hacker sent an email saying, hey, because of COVID, we had to change our bank account number and routing number. Now, why that had anything to do with COVID, I don't know, but it came from the office manager's email address. So the client updated their records and responded and said, our records are updated, we're good. Well, of course, the office manager didn't see it because it got redirected to that subfolder, right? And the hacker deleted it. The hacker waited a week and created an invoice because they already saw what the invoices look like, created an invoice that looked just like what that company was using and sent an invoice out for $125,000. And guess what happened? Their client wired the money to the bank account and routing number that the hacker gave them, and the money was gone. So this is why insurance companies are really concerned about it, because not only ransomware and some other things that I'm sure we're going to talk about, but it's compromises like that real money gets wired out because of the hacker impersonating the person whose email address that they compromised.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Cohen, because the industry statistics right now are 81% of all breaches are because of exactly what you just explained.
Yep.
So that's where the multi-factor authentication has just become paramount. And if you're not doing that, the insurance company is going to require for that action to be taken. And Cohen's well aware of this, but multi-factor is not to spend too much time on this, but it's expanding as well, because it's not only just email anymore. It's getting into remote access and all the different functions that we use throughout our organizations that are behind the scenes with servers and things like that as well. So you may see more and more questions. It's not just a multi-factor authentication question on email. You're going to see it on many aspects of your systems. And in a lot of situations, working with Cohen, a lot of businesses already have layers of protection they don't realize they have, but it's always a great thing to have those conversations frequently with someone like Cohen and his team, so you're up to date on that.
Yeah, and real quick on that too, the reason, like I said, these forms are getting kind of complicated. Most people that are going to receive these forms, so most of you are not going to be able to answer it simply. So right. You're either going to be handing that form to your internal IT guy, if you have an internal IT guy, or you're going to be reaching out to your IT firm. And that's the level of sophistication that these forms are getting, because the insurance companies, as Ted mentioned, it's not just about, okay, put 2FA on your email. They are actively looking at all the compromises that have been happening, and how can we make sure that we're clarifying with our clients, do you have this or not? Because the technology that's required, we can no longer just buy antivirus, have our Comcast modem be our firewall. I'm oversimplifying here, right? And do a couple things, have backup to a USB drive, and we call it good. The level of technology that is required in order to protect yourself, to have those layers of security to protect your organization, insurance companies now are starting to want to require those because of the claims that Ted had been mentioning.
Yeah, my last comment on multi-factor authentication, Cohen, is really a public service announcement for everybody individually. And that is, we're talking about businesses and how to protect ourselves, but a lot of our businesses are tied to our personal lives. And so we do everything in our business life to protect everything we have, yet we become very lazy with our personal environment as well. So multi-factor authentication is something that you can usually easily turn on for other areas. So any social media that you're dealing with, any email accounts you're dealing with personally outside of your business, and definitely anything with financial institutions that you're doing banking with, you must turn on multi-factor authentication, especially if you're using the same username and passwords for your business, because they're just going to carry over, as Cohen said. So equally important is our own personal lives, because if our personal lives are not going well, it obviously impacts our business. So please make sure you're doing the same thing in your personal lives with multi-factor authentication, because it does eliminate, if they say 81% of the problems come from it, that one simple click can eliminate 81% of those problems. So
absolutely. And Ted, we had a question come in that pertains to this as well, just what you were commenting on. So how much, well, frequent questions from insurance, MFA, how much does it cost to implement this as needed to satisfy cyber carrier requirements? Also, how laborious is it to implement and continue to monitor as needed? So really quick on that, when we're talking about like email, two-factor authentication, every email carrier out there has the ability to just enable 2FA at no cost as part of the service itself. If for some reason you have an email carrier that does not have that, it's time to change. Our recommendation is we migrate all of our corporate clients to Microsoft 365. Wonderful solution, lots of security already built in, but 2FA is already a feature that you can enable within Microsoft 365. And then what other IT firms and what Sundog does is we monitor on a regular basis and do an audit of our client accounts to see who has 2FA enabled and who doesn't, just to make sure someone didn't turn it off for a couple of users just because they wanted the convenience of that. We want to make sure that we're letting our clients know that 2FA is enabled across the entire organization. Now, the question, the deeper you go, like Ted was mentioning, insurance carriers are asking for 2FA on other things like firewalls and VPN connections, right? The deeper you go, there can be costs that start to incur. Usually it's not too much until we get to firewalls and some of the hardware that might actually need to be changed out. But at its core, it seems like the most important ones that insurance carriers are concerned about is 2FA on email and then 2FA on VPN connections. And what that means is if you're accessing the internal network from the outside, somehow, some way, and there's multiple ways to go about that, is the way you're accessing it, is 2FA a component of that? So those are the two critical ones. And it should be most likely, at least for our clients, and I assume a lot out there, it's of no cost to be able to enable 2FA, even on VPN and other remote access tools that are being provided to your users. So it is a low cost, overall low cost feature to be able to implement that is really gonna give your organization an incredible level of security, and it's gonna give the insurance company a little breath of relief that, all right, good, at least they've got that enabled.
Yeah, and Cohen, that's a great question for all the reasons you just indicated. But the other thing I'll just point out, because I'll probably forget in the rest of the presentation, is you need to be prepared. Okay, waiting until 1 day or 10 days before your policy is going to renew or you want coverage does not give you time to put these things into place. So if policy renews in June, now is the time to talk to us or your agent or reach out to find out what needs to be done. Because if there are changes that are required, it's going to take Cohen or someone like their team some time to get that done. And if there's costs involved, obviously there's budgeting and planning for that too. So one of the biggest things is it's not like it used to be where you just answer the questionnaire the same as last year, you get your policy, it renews, and you move on. It's going to take a little bit of time, and if changes are needed, you need to start sooner than later. So it's a big thing.
And also on that note too, there are times we've had some of them come across our desk that require a back and forth dialogue with the insurance carrier, and some of those have taken weeks to be able to ultimately just get to understand the question that they're asking in a way that we feel comfortable letting our client know that you can check yes to that because of the wording. So it's not just even the technology you got to deploy. Sometimes there is just a time it takes in order to get the questions answered truthfully, because that's what you want. Because in case of a breach, If you say you had this and you didn't have that, I'm sure that that could cause a little grief during the claim process. So as Ted mentioned, it does take a while. So get on top of it right away as soon as you get that cybersecurity insurance form. And for those of you, if your renewal, is coming up in March, April, May, whatever it might be, why don't you reach out to your carrier right now and just ask them, hey, is this going to be one of those forms, and can you send it to me ahead of time so we can start preparing? Good point, Ted.
Excellent. So another area, Cohen, that's coming up a lot on these questionnaires that's probably equally as important on the front end as the back end, right? And so there's new terms that are being thrown out around backups. So one big fancy word is called air gap backups. So can you give us a little bit of insight onto your beliefs and what happens on backups? And we'll just mention that's equally as important, because if you experience a cyber event and you need your data in order to prove that you don't need to pay a large ransom, we need to know the backup's going to work. And so that's of equal importance. So how about your comments on air backups?
Yeah. So initially, one of the things that was happening, ransomware. So what ransomware is, really quick, is if you get it, and usually you get that, it comes in via email, you click on a link that you shouldn't have, and it downloads a virus. And what that virus does is it encrypts all your Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, databases, PDFs, AutoCAD drawings, all the important stuff for you, and encrypts it all. And in order to get it back, you have to have the key. And to get the key, you have to pay the hackers whatever the ransom might be, whatever that dollar is, in order to get your data back. One of the nice ways to be able to not have to pay them any money is be able to restore from backup. Well, the hackers got smart. So what they started doing is not only would they crypt everything I just listed, but then they would actually look for the backups that are sitting on the network. And they would go to the backup and they would encrypt those too. So now you all your data and your backup data is completely unavailable for you, and your only option is to pay the hackers at that point the ransom that they're asking for. So backup technology continues to evolve. That's why it's really important to talk to your IT guy, your IT provider about, hey, does the backup solution we have, will it prevent being encrypted by a ransomware attack? And have them explain it to you, right? That's important, just to make sure. So also it means, like, air gap means if it comes into your organization and ransomware is going across all your computers and servers, are the backups actually separated, air gapped, right? Separated from the infection to be able to come over to that particular technology. Now, air gapping is done in a variety of ways, but ultimately what it means is your live backups, can they be hacked by the hackers that have penetrated your network and deploying ransomware? Most do not. There are a handful out there that do, and that is a really important one, because the last thing you want to do is stroke a check and pay these guys money, whether you have insurance or not. So air gapping is important, and also offsite replication is really important, because what if all those scenarios fall apart somehow, some way? Most likely, if you have offsite replication, so all your backups are being replicated every night to a secure data center somewhere in the world, and that is actually, I'm going to call it inexpensive technology that works really well, that your IT guy or your IT provider should already be providing to you as just part of the service, right? But having the backups offsite now allows you to be able to download those and deploy your backups locally, because they're safe and they were protected from the hacker. That makes sense, Ted?
Clear as mud, right? But
right.
It's exactly what the insurance companies are looking for, right? They're really looking for, I'm going to call it 3 backups, right? I call it the production one, the active one you might have on site. You have the site one, which is, most people have been doing for quite a long time. This air gap is a little bit of a new term, as you explained. And it's really just saying that there's no way those hackers can get through to that last backup, because it's disconnected from the network. So there's that space, as you showed. So, if you've got those 3 things, that's a great thing. The last part to it is, and this is probably something that it goes all ways. It goes with us as business owners. It also goes with technology people, is we probably don't test our backups often enough. So insurance companies are starting to ask, like, when was the last time you verified your backup is successful? And do you know it's there? So that's one of those trends that I see increasing a long time here, Cohen, is where they're going to want to know that probably once, maybe 3 times a year, you're testing, is your backup actually valid? So you do have a ransomware, we can tell these people we're not going to pay you because we have a backup as of midnight last night and we're already up and running. So therefore, there's no value in your claim.
Yep.
Secondary factor to that, because the ransomware says that's fine. We also stole all your data of your clients, and we're going to sell that on the internet. So there still might be a ransomware, but it creates some leverage when you can say we've got a successful backup already in.
Yeah, and that's important when you mentioned about they're ransoming the data that they stole. Not only did they encrypt it, they sold it as well. And that's where the check boxes that the insurance company is asking you to check and the technology that they want you to have, ultimately the goal is that's what's going to prevent you from getting ransomware or hacked or any sort of infection whatsoever. And that's the ultimate goal, right? It's not just about reduction in insurance rates or making sure you have the right coverage. It's about not even having to call the insurance company and have a claim. So that's why we're not excited is the wrong word, but we feel validated in the service that we provided our clients, because at this point, those insurance forms that we're seeing, our clients are checking a majority of those boxes. So it's apparent IT companies have always been aware of this, and we've been talking to our clients and designing our solutions to protect our clients. But now we're seeing an insurance company as a third party starting to talk about, advocate for, and in many cases insist on those same technologies in order to protect their clients from having claims. And that just shows the level, as Ted mentioned early on, the level of infections, the level of hacks that are happening. And in fact, it's the #1 crime against businesses in the United States right now are cyber attacks. Hey, Ted, we got another question that came in. And just kind of about the forms in general, well, one, how much coverage is enough coverage? I'm sure that's always been the case, whether it was fire or auto, or I'm sure people are always asking that. But when it comes to cyber coverage, is there a best practice on how much do I need to get in order to make sure that whatever I get ransom for, the insurance coverage is going to cover?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as us estimating the replacement cost on a building, right? Because ultimately comes down to, in simple terms to me, is the IBM study last year indicated that the cost for one record of personal protected information is $180 per record. And that's the cost of monitoring and providing service and notices to every person that was impacted in that ransomware attack. And so if you look at it in a simple math, if someone has 10,000 records times $180, that's 1.8 million. Most people would look at it and say, I don't think I need $1.8 million worth of coverage, because it sounds like a lot of coverage, right? But the reality of it is if we sit down and we analyze what records we have, what levels of sophistication do we have in place? Some people go, to the 5th degree, right, Cohen, of protection, and others go by the minimums. So you can evaluate that as. I think the biggest thing is you must have a policy. You got to start somewhere. Our minimum recommendation would probably be $1 million because that's a common thing. And when into forensic cyber specialists, I don't know what their going rate is. It could be $1,000, $1,500 an hour. It's going to go very fast. The ransom demands are very large. I believe the ransom demands they've went up double the last 2 years. So if it was 100,000, it went to 200,000 to 400,000. So once they have your data frozen up, they're asking for large sums of money. So just those two factors alone are very expensive. And then we talk about taking care of the records that were damaged or sold. It becomes expensive as well. So I recommend probably at least $1 million to start there, and then see where it goes from there, right? There's always the cost, the benefit analysis that's out there. So no rule of thumb, but $1 million is great. My last comment on coverage is you really probably need a standalone policy. There's companies out there that are saying, hey, you've got cyber defender, you got cyber whatever. And if you look at your insurance policy with your property, your liability and auto premiums, it says cyber protection, $186. Okay. You're going to get $186 worth of claims.
Yeah, right.
There's not much there. It might help you pay a small part of a ransom, $10,000 or something like that, but it's become a sophisticated product. And just like we need a separate general liability policy, a separate workers' comp policy, a separate property policy, cyber has become a policy that needs to be separate as well for the special coverages that are available.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend everyone attending today, talk to someone like Ted, because, if you're a doctor's office and you've got protected health information, right, PHI, well, that's a lot more exposure than someone is keeping any records about their clients. Or what if you're a manufacturer and, okay, I don't have any personal identifiable information, but what happens if I have a cyber attack and my lines go down? And from a revenue perspective, it could be catastrophic to my organization if our technology actually went down during an attack like that. So that's why these questions, I highly encourage sitting down with your insurance agent, sitting down with a TED, and actually saying specifically like, hey, this is what it would be like for me if technology stopped for a period of days. And here's what I have that someone could, if a hacker came in, they could take. What does that mean from an insurance coverage perspective? And Ted's absolutely right. That $189 little piece, yeah, that insurance company is not going to be able to take care of you during an event like that. And during these events, the last thing you want to do is be arguing with your insurance company or being nickel and dimed with them. What you want is a real partner during that process, because it's going to be impactful. It's going to be frustrating and aggravating. And it's going to be stressful. So you want to make sure you have the right company. Like, that's how I feel about having Ted and Crum-Halsted taking care of us. Is I know I got a partner that if that event ever happened, they're going to be right there side by side with me, walking me through the process to get to the other end. All right, Ted, we're over half hour right now. I have a couple more questions, but I didn't know, is there something else you wanted to make sure people walked away with before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I would just mention, I mean, obviously there's plenty of other things that come up on these questionnaires, and it's really just a level of sophistication. But the other thing I would just mention to everybody, we talked about testing your backups, but it's becoming important to insurance companies is training your employees and protecting them from phishing emails and events that are happening very common. For example, Cohen used the example of somebody getting an email that said, hey, we changed our bank accounts because of COVID. That's one of the oldest gimmicks in the cyber world, of saying someone changing their bank accounts. It's as simple as, if you get an email from somebody that says our bank accounts have changed, you should automatically assume that's not true. Okay. Most of us have been in the business world a lot. I don't know if I've ever changed banking accounts, Cohen. I don't know about you. It happen occasionally, but most people have their basic checking accounts, operating accounts are pretty stable, and they're there. So if you ever receive an email that says, hey, we changed our bank accounts, you should not accept that. You should pick up the phone, call Cohen, whoever your contact is at the company, and say, hey, is this true? And once they tell that it's true, you should probably email the partner or the CFO or somebody and say, just so you know, I got this email and I confirmed it, but I want a secondary confirmation so that information is confirmed to be true, because it does happen. If we take that one simple step, it will eliminate a lot of problems that happen, because we've learned to just accept email as valid. And unfortunately, that's how the criminals take advantage of us. So training and those simple little steps go a long way in validation. And it's really multi-factor authentication. So when it comes right back to it, okay, I got an email with instructions. I can't just accept them anymore. I have to authenticate that, or secondary confirmation of the change that's occurring.
Absolutely.
So it kind of goes full circle. So training's a really big thing. And then the last comment I would make, and you can ask any other questions that people have, is end of life software. And Cohen loves this, because I'm a guy that loves to hold on. I like the value out of my products that I pay for. But end of life software is becoming a big issue with insurance companies, because the reality of it is the provider is no longer creating patches and protecting that product. So it's no longer providing the value it needs to. So if you're operating on end of life software in any part of your organization, it's time to upgrade and move on, whatever that means. For us, it's our management system. For our customers, it could be as simple as for a retail company, your how you process your payments. You might have been using the same processing that you used 10 years ago. That's probably end of life. We're probably past that, so it needs to change. So,
but even some common ones that we see a lot when we onboard new clients is they still have Windows 7 running. Well, Windows 7 is end of life with Microsoft. That is a complete exposed operating systems sitting on your network, waiting to be taken advantage of, or especially if it's still actively being used by an end user, realize that end user is out there in the world using a machine that is connecting to something else outside your organization, that it could be exploited. And then the other thing is Windows Server 2008 R2. That went end of life, and we still come across those machines, and it is a big vulnerability. So yes, definitely keep your POS system updated, your ERP system updated, absolutely. But don't forget about just the regular operating system that Microsoft provides. Even though that machine is working great for you, if it's end of life, it's an exposure, and that's what insurance companies are looking for as well. Looks like another question hopped on. Yes, someone was asking, hey, Cohen, you're our IT company. Are our backups safe? Absolutely 100% safe. No, I shouldn't say 100% because you can never say 100% because you never know what could happen. But we go to great lengths to make sure that all of the backups that we provide our clients are, as Ted mentioned, they're ransomware proof, let's say, so they can't make that hop over. But then we also, twice a week, verify the backup integrity of every one of our clients. And it's a human being that does that verification, not just some monitoring system telling us, yes, the backup was successful. We put human eyes on every backup of every one of our clients twice a week, just to make sure that our monitoring systems are good and in place. So great question. The other questions, Ted, I think we've pretty much covered. Like there was, hey, if I have a general liability and umbrella, do I really need cyber? Can I just not answer the questions? I know that answer is no. If they're asking you for these, you're going to need to answer these in order to get a cyber policy. And I assume, and I think you said it before, Ted, do you think we're getting to the point that the cyber policy is going to be a requirement of insurance carriers? And if you can't answer enough of the questions, or let alone if you don't answer it at all, I bet there's a lot of insurance companies that just aren't going to offer coverage anymore to you, right?
Yeah, that is starting to happen. It's probably the first time we've seen it, but there are definitely situations where the insurance companies will just walk away because the data that they see and supports their decision making indicates that that's too high of a risk, and they're not interested in it. And we talked about this briefly, Cohen. I won't elaborate too much on it, but we don't think about it. But we write a small $1 million policy for a 2-person office or a little retail shop. We're like, hey, that's great, right? They're protected, all is good, but they're just as vulnerable as that small business with 2 employees to hit policy limits. There's a very high likelihood that an event occurs and they hit a policy limit of $1 million as well. So the insurance companies, it's no longer, hey, that's a small outfit and there's not much exposure to us. They are really concerned about policy limit claims. Because all of the awards and damages are so high anymore. So it doesn't take much to get to that level. So they definitely are at a point where if you're not compliant with their request, they will just not offer coverage.
Yep.
Ultimately, for me to kind of wrap up on my side, Cohen, what I see happening maybe in 2022 and going forward, this is requiring IT people and insurance companies to kind of come together. Right. So I think there's going to be more of a collaboration to try and work together to provide better solutions, not only for you and our companies and businesses to be protected, but ultimately to protect the insurance company. And if we don't work collaboratively together like that, ultimately premiums are just going to keep going through the roof, right? Yeah. Claims are going to keep happening. And so somehow we have to get this under control. So it's not really anybody trying to control it one way or another. It's really just protecting our businesses, which is the key to your whole series. So, thanks, Cohen, for having me part of the series. I definitely appreciate it. If anybody has questions, I believe our contact, or Cohen will follow up with everybody to make sure you have our contact information.
Absolutely.
Happy to review what you have, give you a secondary opinion, confirm the buying decision you've already made. So appreciate it. Thanks, Cohen, and we'll let you finish it up.
That's great. Now, I would encourage anyone on this call, if you just want someone to put a second set of eyes on the policy, just to make sure that you are getting the right coverage, I personally can't recommend Ted and Crum-Halsted enough. And the email that we send out with a link to this video, I'll also put a link into a cybersecurity presentation that we did that you could share with your staff just to educate them. That training part that Ted was talking about, we'll put that in there, and we'll have all of our contact information, mine and Ted's, in there as well. So yes, Ted, I can't say enough. I really appreciate you being on here. Great information. And I can see we'll probably do another one of these in 6 months or so, because I bet this is going to continue to evolve out there. And for all of you, I have a ton of clients on here, but if you're not a client of ours, kind of the same thing with Ted. If you were curious and just wanted a second set of eyes on your network to see, do you have 2FA enabled on your Microsoft accounts? Is your backup protected from a ransomware attack? Please reach out to me and let me know. We would do an assessment of that, no cost, super easy to do. We come in and we can at least give you let you sleep better at night knowing your IT guy or your IT firm that you're engaged with is doing an adequate job to take care of your network and preparing you for the new cyber policies and the questions that you're going to have to ultimately answer. So with that, I know we went over a little bit, but I thought it was really good content, but appreciate everyone that attended today. We'll get that email out to you as soon as possible. And don't forget, if you're watching this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the bell. We'd love you to like us. And any comments you want, just reach out and we'll get those answers to you. But with that, thanks again, Ted. Thanks everyone else for attending, and have yourself a wonderful day. Bye now.